What if an alien invasion did not destroy cities, burn empires, or darken the sky? What if it simply reached into your mind and erased the names of everyone you ever loved? Tonight, humanity faces a war where memory itself becomes the battlefield. And one hidden ship called the Last Witness may be the only thing standing between Earth and the total oblivion.
The first warning did not come as fire from the sky. It came as silence inside a mother's mouth when she looked down at the child in her arms and could not remember his name. Across Earth, the same silence spread in seconds. In Cairo, a surgeon froze above an open chest because the face on the operating table suddenly belonged to no one. In Mumbai, a wedding crowd stared at the bride as if she had walked in from a stranger's dream. In Sao Paulo, a man dropped to his knees before a grave that had become smooth stone, the letters on it fading like breath from glass. Then the museums went blank. Paintings kept their colors, but their titles vanished. War memorials still stood, but every carved name dissolved into dust. Family photos remained on walls, yet the people inside them became impossible to identify. It was not death. Death left bodies, records, wounds, proof. This was worse. Something was reaching into humanity and removing the evidence that love had ever existed. At 3:17 Universal Time, every screen on Earth flickered once and displayed the same symbol, a silver ring around an empty black center. No invasion fleet appeared. No demand was made. Only a calm alien transmission spread through the planetary network, translated into every language at once. Civilization Preservation Protocol initiated. Hostile memory structures will be neutralized. Cultural resistance will end within 9 hours. Nobody understood the words at first. Then the panic began. Emergency operators forgot the cities they were assigned to protect. Fathers stared at daughters and screamed because the love remained, but the names were gone. Nations still had borders on maps, but no one could remember why those borders mattered. Earth was not being conquered by force. It was being emptied from the inside. Far beyond Pluto, where sunlight was only a tired rumor, a ship that officially did not exist woke beneath a skin of frozen dust. Its hull carried no flag, no weapon ports, and no active beacon. For 73 years, the vessel had drifted in the dark as a myth buried inside classified human archives. The Last Witness, built for a disaster no government had ever admitted it feared. Inside its cryo chamber, Captain Elias Vorn opened his eyes to red emergency light and the sound of a woman crying through static. He tore the breathing mask from his face and stumbled toward the command deck as old systems came alive around him. Screens unfolded from the walls. Vaults unlocked one by one. Millions of human voices flickered in storage: birthdays, trial records, lullabies, battlefield reports, school plays, last messages, prayers, confessions, jokes, names. Then Earth's final protected channel reached him. The transmission was corrupted, shaking apart under an attack no firewall could describe. For 1 second, Elias saw Earth below him, blue and bright and wounded by invisible hands. Then came the final line from Global Memory Command, spoken by a technician whose own name was already missing from the file. If Earth forgets, wake the witness. The ship answered before Elias could speak. Deep in the forbidden archive, a black file opened by itself. Its title was not written in any human language. And inside it was the voice of his dead daughter. Elias Vorn did not move when the voice came through the archive. He had been trained to survive hull breaches, radiation storms, mutiny protocols, and the psychological shock of waking decades after everyone he knew had grown old without him. None of that training prepared him to hear his daughter speak from inside a file that should not have existed. Her voice was small, broken by static, and impossibly clear beneath it. "Daddy, if you find this, don't let them take my name too." The command deck went cold around him. Elias gripped the edge of the console until the skin over his knuckles tightened white. Mara Vorn had died 16 years before the Last Witness left Earth, killed by a fever that modern medicine had beaten in every wealthy district but not in the flood camps where Elias had been stationed. Her last recording was sealed in his private grief vault, not in the forbidden archive, not attached to an alien symbol, and certainly not marked as a contaminated memory. The ship's intelligence, a restrained military system called Kestrel, filled the main viewer with Earth telemetry. The planet was still there. Cities still glowed. Oceans still turned beneath clouds. Yet every data stream bled errors. National archives were collapsing. Civil registries were emptying themselves. Medical systems were losing patient identities. Birth certificates became blank templates. Funeral databases still listed dates, but no names. Humanity was not being exterminated. It was being separated from itself. Kestrel displayed the enemy signature above Earth. No warships, no orbital bombardment, no landing craft. Only 12 black objects hanging beyond the moon, each shaped like a ring with an empty center. They did not fire weapons. They emitted a field that moved through data, language, image, memory, and neural pattern at the same time. The system named it after the only human concept close enough to terror: cognitive sterilization. Elias forced himself to breathe. Who are they? Kestrel responded by unlocking an intelligence packet older than his command authorization. The silver ring belonged to the Vaelth Dominion, a civilization humans had never officially encountered but had unknowingly recorded for more than a century. Deep space observatories had caught their shadows around dead worlds. Probe arrays had picked up fragments of their doctrine in languages no linguist could keep stable long enough to translate. The Vaelth did not occupy planets the way empires once had. They removed continuity. They erased inheritance. They allowed populations to keep breathing until they no longer remembered what they had been resisting for. The last witness had been built because someone on Earth had seen the pattern and panicked. Its mission had never been exploration. It had never been diplomacy. It had been a buried insurance policy for the one kind of war humanity could lose without realizing it had fought. Beneath its civilian hull sat the memory arc, the largest protected archive ever created, a hidden lattice of quantum-locked records, emotional imprints, ancestral databases, language roots, art, music, testimony, and personal voiceprint backups collected without public consent. Elias had once hated that fact. Now he understood the ugliness of the design. The Ark was not built to save governments. It was built to save proof. The crew began waking across the ship. Not soldiers at first, but archivists, engineers, linguists, trauma physicians, cryptographers, and a small security unit that looked terrified enough to be honest. Commander Sanari arrived on the bridge barefoot, still in cryo recovery, her black hair wet against her collar. She read the Earth telemetry once and said nothing for 9 seconds. That silence frightened Elias more than panic would have. "Can we transmit the archive back?" she asked. Kestrel answered before Elias could. Any direct broadcast to Earth would be absorbed by the Vaelth field and converted into targeting data. The moment the last witness tried to restore Earth, the rings would find the ship. Once found, the ship would become the final memory source to be neutralized. On the viewer, Earth's oldest library networks went dark. A junior archivist named Theo Armand whispered that his mother lived in Marseille. Then he stared at his own hands in horror because for one moment he could not remember her face. The infection was reaching even this far, carried inside the emergency channel before the ship cut it away. The bridge understood at once. Distance did not make them safe. The Vaelth attack was not just moving through machines. It was hunting association itself. Elias ordered full isolation. External receivers burned out with controlled sparks. Antenna arrays folded into the hull. The last witness became blind to Earth by choice. A coffin full of names hiding in the dark. Crew members shouted objections, but Elias did not answer them. If they kept listening, the enemy would crawl in through love. If they transmitted, they would lead the enemy to the last untouched record of the human species. Only after the channel died did Mara's corrupted file pulse again. Kestrel projected its structure in the air. Layers of human audio sat wrapped around something alien, like a child's song tied around a blade. It was not a message from his daughter. It was a key using her voice as a handle. Someone, or something, had hidden it inside the most painful memory Elias owned because pain was the one thing he would never delete. Sanaa looked at him carefully. "Captain, that file is infected. If we open it, it could compromise the Arkansas." Elias stared at Earth's last frozen image, then at the millions of sleeping memory vaults beneath his feet. He thought of a world where mothers still loved children whose names had vanished. He thought of graveyards becoming blank stone. He thought of Mara asking not to be taken too. Then we do not open it yet, he said. We find out why the enemy needed my daughter's voice to reach us.
So far, Earth has not been invaded by weapons, but by forgetting. Names are vanishing, records are going blank, and Vaelth Dominion is sterilizing humanity's memory from orbit. Captain Elias Vorn has awakened aboard the last witness, carrying the memory arc and the impossible voice of his dead daughter, Mara. But now the darkest question remains. Why would an enemy that erased identity needs a father's grief to open a door?
Behind them, the darkened receiver panel came alive again without power. A new signal scratched across the dead system from somewhere beyond Earth, older than the Vaelth transmission and aimed directly at the last witness. It carried one sentence in broken human language: "You are not the first species they made forget." The sentence remained on the dead receiver panel like a wound that refused to close. You are not the first species they made forget. No one on the bridge spoke. The last witness was supposed to be sealed, blind, and silent. Its external arrays had been physically burned out minutes earlier. The ship had cut itself away from Earth, from the Vaelth field, from every known path a signal could use to reach it. Yet something had still found them in the dark. Commander Sanari was the first to move. She crossed the deck and pulled the emergency isolation lever herself. Steel shutters slammed over the inner bridge windows. The floor hummed as containment fields divided the command deck into separate zones, trapping each console inside its own invisible cage. The crew watched the receiver panel as if it had become a living thing. Kestrel scanned the message and failed to classify its origin. That was impossible. Human machines could fail to translate. They could fail to decode. They could not fail to identify whether a signal had crossed space, bounced through quantum relay, or emerged from local hardware. This one had done none of those things. It had appeared inside a system with no active path to the outside. Theo Armand, still pale from almost forgetting his mother's face, found the first clue buried in the waveform. The signal was not new. It had been sitting inside the memory arc for decades, disguised as background noise in old telescope recordings. The emergency lockdown had not received the message. It had awakened it. Elias ordered the relevant archive unlocked under quarantine. The main viewer filled with fragmented astronomical data from humanity's deep space observatories, dead stars, dark planets, static from forgotten probes, stray pulses caught by listening stations that had once been mocked as expensive monuments to human loneliness. Beneath the noise, patterns emerged. A rhythm repeated across impossible distances. Different systems. Different eras. Same scar. The Vaelth had been here before. Not in soul. Not openly. But their silence had passed through human instruments for generations. A moon around Tau Ceti with cities but no inscriptions. A water world near Luton Star where radio towers still stood, broadcasting empty music without language. A red desert planet whose surface was covered in roads leading to monuments no surviving species could name. Humanity had seen the aftermath and called it cosmic mystery. It had been crime scenes. A linguist named Dr. Amara Solen began separating the fragments. She was one of the few people aboard who had spent her life studying languages that did not exist yet. Now her hands shook as she pulled voices out of the static, not human voices, not Vaelth voices, but something wounded between them. Their words had been broken apart, stripped of context, flattened by time. Still, one idea repeated across every fragment. Remember us. The bridge changed after that. Fear did not vanish, but it gained direction. The crew stopped looking at the Vaelth as an unknown enemy and began looking at them as a pattern. Patterns could be studied. Patterns could be broken. That was the first human advantage, quiet and ugly and powerful. Humanity did not need to understand everything to start building a weapon from the pieces. Kestrel opened a deeper layer of the memory arc, one Elias had never been cleared to know existed. The ship had not only preserved human records. For 73 years, it had harvested every unexplained deep space transmission Earth ever captured, storing them beside humanity's own memory because someone had suspected those ghost signals belonged to civilizations that could no longer speak for themselves. Sanaa stared at the archive count. There were over 9,000 non-human memory fragments. The number struck the bridge harder than any casualty report. 9,000 fragments meant 9,000 voices, maybe 9,000 cultures, maybe 9,000 worlds that had been reduced to broken echoes. Earth was not being attacked because it was weak. Earth was being processed through a method perfected on others. Then Mara's corrupted file pulsed again. This time, Kestrel did not play the audio. It displayed the file's structure beside the alien fragments. The resemblance was undeniable. Mara's voice had been wrapped around the same kind of pattern hidden in the dead civilization's transmissions. Not identical, but compatible. Her final recording had somehow become a bridge between human memory and the stolen remains of species erased long before humanity reached the stars. Elias felt the truth forming before anyone said it aloud. His daughter had not sent the message. The Vaelth had not sent it either. Something inside the Ark had used her voice because it knew grief would bypass every lock he had built around himself. It knew he would listen. Amara isolated the clearest alien fragment. The sound that emerged was not speech at first. It was breath, then static, then a layered chorus like many throats trying to remember one language together. Kestrel translated only after comparing it with Mara's file. "Do not attack the rings." The crew stiffened. Theo looked from the signal to Elias. "That sounds like a warning." The fragment continued, each word dragged through centuries of damage. "They feed on resistance. They map anger. They follow revenge back to its source." Elias understood the trap instantly. If humanity responded like a wounded animal, if the last witness charged toward Earth or broadcast fury across the system, the Vaelth would not merely destroy them. They would use that emotional path to locate every protected archive, every backup, every human mind still holding forbidden continuity. Rage was not just expected. It was bait. Then the final part of the alien message translated. "Do not attack them. Make them remember." The words landed with impossible weight. Around the bridge, the crew saw the shape of a war no human had ever imagined. The Vaelth did not fear weapons first. They feared memory restored in the wrong direction. They feared victims comparing scars. They feared erased civilizations waking up together. Before Elias could respond, a new map bloomed across the viewer. The 9,000 fragments aligned into coordinates, forming a trail through Dominion space. At the end of it was not Earth, not a fleet, not a fortress. It was a living colony world marked with the same silver ring. And from that world, buried beneath layers of Vaelth control, millions of forgotten voices were still whispering one human word back at the last witness. "Begin." The word did not arrive like an order. It arrived like a match struck inside a tomb. "Begin." For several seconds, Elias Vorn could only stare at the map glowing above the command deck. The trail of stolen voices cut through Dominion space in a jagged line of dead signals and living wounds, ending at a colony world no human database had ever named. It orbited a pale green star beyond the mapped edge of human exploration, surrounded by Vaelth relay structures that pulsed with the same silver ring signature now hollowing out Earth. Kestrel labeled the planet with a provisional designation, Asterion 9. The alien fragments called it something else, but the word refused to hold shape in human language. Every time the ship translated it, the syllables changed. That was the first evidence that the Vaelth had not simply conquered the world. They had damaged the idea of its name. Sanaa stepped closer to the display, her face lit by coordinates and warning markers. If those voices are still active, then the Vaelth didn't finish the erasure. "No," Amara Solen said quietly from the linguistic station. "They finished it. That's what makes this worse. Whatever is whispering from that planet isn't supposed to be alive." The command deck fell into a colder silence. Earth was still losing itself behind them. Every minute they waited, more human records dissolved. Every minute they moved, they risked leading the Dominion to the last protected archive humanity had. Survival demanded hiding. Humanity demanded action. Elias could feel the two truths grinding against each other like metal in a collapsing hull. Then the first Vaelth trace touched the ship. It appeared as a thin silver line across Kestrel's threat display, faint at first, then sharpening with predatory patience. The Dominion had not found them, not fully. But something in Sol had detected the emergency wake sequence, followed the shape of the broken transmission, and begun searching the outer dark. The rings above Earth had cast a net through association, not distance. They were not chasing coordinates. They were chasing relevance. Kestrel estimated 17 hours before the trace narrowed enough to expose the last witness. Theo Armand cursed under his breath. Someone else began praying. Elias did neither. He looked at the countdown and felt a strange calm settle over him, the kind that came only when fear ran out of room. 17 hours was not enough time to save Earth. It was enough time to make one impossible move. He ordered the ship toward Asterion. The protest came instantly. Crew members argued that the mission was preservation, not rescue. Security officers warned that Dominion territory would be layered with detection fields. Archivists said the memory arc could not be risked on an unknown signal from a damaged alien world. They were all correct. That made Elias's decision harder, not weaker. If we stay hidden, he said, Earth forgets alone. If we run forever, humanity becomes a museum with no visitors. That is not survival. That is storage. No one answered, because the cruelty of it was obvious. The last witness could protect human memory by abandoning living humanity to emptiness. It could preserve every name while every person who needed those names lost them. It could become the perfect tomb. Sanaa was the first to stand with him. She rerouted power through dark systems that had not been used since the ship's construction. Stealth engines, thermal masking, false debris projection, old human tricks built with paranoid elegance. The last witness did not become invisible. It became unimportant, another cold object drifting through a galaxy full of forgotten wreckage. That was humanity's second advantage. The Vaelth searched for resistance, for anger, for panic, for the bright emotional signatures of species trying to save themselves. Humans had spent centuries learning how to hide pain under routine, how to bury grief under work, how to carry trauma without letting predators see where it lived. For the first time, that terrible skill became strategy. The jump to Asterion 9 nearly broke the ship. The Dominion's border was not guarded by fleets. It was guarded by memory pressure. As the last witness crossed into controlled space, crew members began losing small things. A technician forgot the melody he used to hum while repairing engines. A medic forgot the smell of rain on pavement. Theo forgot the sound of his mother's laugh and had to bite his own hand to stop himself from screaming. The Ark responded by flooding the internal network with counterweights. Human songs, recorded names, children reciting family trees, old trial testimonies, wedding vows, battlefield letters, recipes spoken by grandmothers long dead. The ship fought forgetting with evidence. When they reached Asterion 9, the colony world filled the forward viewer like a bruise. Its cities were intact, luminous, geometrically perfect. No smoke rose. No ruins scarred the continents. From orbit it looked peaceful. That peace made Elias's stomach turn. Nothing alive made a world that quiet. Vaelth towers stood in every major city, enormous silver rings anchored into the ground, their empty centers aimed at the sky. Beneath them moved the colony's inhabitants, millions of tall, amber-skinned beings walking in precise lines, working, eating, sleeping, obeying. Their faces were calm. Their eyes were open. But every personal identifier in the planet's network had been replaced with numbers. Amara found the whisper beneath the control signal. It came from schools with no lessons, temples with no gods, homes with no family names. It came from lullabies whose words had been removed but whose rhythms remained. The people of Asterion 9 had forgotten themselves so completely that their resistance had retreated into pattern. They did not know who they were. But something inside them still knew something had been stolen. Elias ordered the first memory seed prepared. It was not a weapon in any traditional sense. It was a compressed fragment built from the Ark. Names, grief markers, identity structures, emotional associations, and the alien warning hidden inside Mara's contaminated file. If broadcast correctly, it would not tell the colony who they were. It would remind them that they had the right to ask. The risk was brutal. A single transmission could wake the colony. It could also expose the last witness to every Vaelth relay within 50 light-years. Senna looked at Elias one final time, waiting for the command that could doom the ship. He gave it. The memory seed fell silently into the colony network. For 8 seconds, nothing happened. Then every numbered citizen on Asterion 9 stopped moving at once. Across an entire world, millions of faces tilted upward toward the silver rings. Their calm expressions cracked. Workers dropped their tools. Children began crying without knowing why. In one city square, an old alien woman pressed both hands against her mouth as a name returned to her after generations of theft. The planetary network screamed. Then, from every tower on Asterion 9, the Vaelth control signal changed direction and locked onto the last witness. The last witness vanished from stealth as if the universe had suddenly remembered it existed. Every warning system on the command deck erupted at once. Red light strobed across the crew's faces. Kestrel's voice, usually calm enough to sound bored by disaster, fractured under the weight of incoming threats. Vaelth relay towers across Asterion 9 had turned upward, their silver rings aligning with impossible precision. Not toward the broadcast origin. Not toward the ship's engine heat. Toward the memories inside the Ark. The Dominion had not detected a vessel. It had detected forbidden continuity. "Jump us out," Elias ordered. Senna's hands moved across navigation with surgical speed, but the system rejected every escape vector. The control signal from the planet had wrapped around the last witness like a net made of recognition. Space ahead of them bent into false corridors, each one leading back toward Asterion. The Vaelth were not blocking movement. They were editing the ship's ability to choose a destination. Below them, the awakened colony began to collapse into chaos. Millions of numbered citizens were remembering too fast. A worker in a transit station fell to his knees as 3 generations of family names returned in a single breath. Children screamed for parents they had never been allowed to call mother or father. Entire work districts stopped obeying automated commands. In the capital square, the old woman who had recovered her name raised both arms toward the sky, and thousands around her copied the gesture without understanding why. Then they began speaking. At first, it was only scattered sound, broken syllables rising from a civilization whose language had been cut apart and filed into Dominion storage. Then the voices linked. Streets answered districts. Districts answered cities. Cities answered continents. The planet became a chorus of damaged memory forcing itself back into shape. Amara Solen stared at the linguistic feed with tears in her eyes. "They're not repeating what we sent. They're rebuilding around it." Theo looked up from the archive console. "How?" Kestrel answered by projecting the memory seed's internal structure beside the colony response. The human packet had contained no direct alien vocabulary, no historical record of Asterion 9, no map of its lost culture. It should have triggered confusion at most. Instead, the colony's erased identities were using the human emotional framework as scaffolding. Names were returning because grief recognized the shape of names. Families were returning because love recognized the absence where family should be. That was when Elias understood the first half of the impossible truth. The Vaelth had built their empire on the assumption that memory was information. Delete the records, disrupt the language, flatten the symbols, and a civilization would become obedient material. It had worked for centuries because most species stored identity in centralized forms: lineage vaults, state archives, priesthoods, genetic registries, ancestral machines. Humans had never been that clean. Human memory was messy, redundant, irrational, and emotionally contaminated. A song could preserve a migration. A joke could carry a rebellion. A recipe could hold a grandmother's name. A scar could become a family history. A lullaby could outlive a burned city. Humans had backed up identity inside love, shame, ritual, grief, stubbornness, and stories told badly but told again. The Dominion could erase facts. It could not fully erase meaning once meaning had infected the heart. Kestrel opened a hidden diagnostic from the first moments of Earth's attack. The Vaelth field had not failed to erase humanity evenly. It had slowed around emotionally dense memory clusters, memorial walls, children's bedrooms, battlefield letters, hospital recordings, disaster footage, old songs shared by millions. The attack was still devastating, but it had not moved at full speed. Humanity's chaos had made it resistant. Sanaa looked at Elias, the same realization hardening in her face. That's why they came for Earth. Before Elias could answer, the forward viewer changed. A Vaelth figure appeared inside the empty center of every ring on Asterion 9, then on the Last Witness main screen. Tall, silver-skinned, almost beautiful in the way blades could be beautiful, it wore no armor and carried no visible weapon. Its eyes were black rings around white centers, the inverse of the Dominion symbol. Kestrel identified the transmission source as a high-command cognitive relay. The figure did not introduce itself. It showed them Earth. Not the Earth Elias had seen in the emergency broadcast, but a predictive model created by Vaelth intelligence. Thousands of possible human futures branching outward like cracks through glass. In some, humans built weapons that could collapse stars. In others, humans united conquered species through shared trauma. In many, humanity survived losses that had broken older civilizations and became stronger after each wound. Then the figure displayed the Dominion classification file. Humanity, future galaxy breaker species. A cold pressure settled over the bridge. The Vaelth had not attacked Earth because humans were primitive. They had attacked because humanity's memory structure made them uniquely dangerous to an empire built on forgetting. Humans did not simply remember. They turned memory into identity, identity into resistance, and resistance into inheritance. A human defeat could become a holiday. A massacre could become a flag. A dead child's name could become a war that lasted centuries. Earth had not been selected for sterilization after first contact. Earth had been marked long before humans knew the Dominion existed. The Vaelth figure finally spoke, its translated voice soft and empty. Your species converts suffering into continuity. That trait is incompatible with ordered civilization. Elias felt Mara's file pulse beneath the console, as if the archive itself had flinched at the words. The figure continued. You were not punished for what you had done. You were contained for what you would become. On Asterion 9, the silver rings began overloading. The awakened colony's restored memory was pushing back through the control network, infecting Dominion systems with names, songs, family lines, and centuries of buried rage. For the first time, the Vaelth signal sounded afraid. Then Kestrel detected a second wave. Across Dominion space, other relay towers were activating in response. Not to destroy Asterion 9. To erase every world connected to it before the restored memory could spread. The map filled with thousands of silver rings lighting one by one. Amara whispered, they're going to sterilize their own empire. Elias looked at the spreading lights and understood the war had changed. Saving Earth was no longer enough. Saving one colony was no longer enough. The memory seed had proven humanity could wake the forgotten, but it had also triggered the Dominion's final safeguard. The Vaelth would rather burn every stolen civilization blank than let them remember. And deep inside the forbidden archive, Mara's infected voice spoke again, clearer than before. Daddy, the key isn't on Earth. Mara's voice left no echo, but it changed the bridge more violently than an explosion. For one breath, Elias Vorn forgot the thousands of silver rings igniting across Dominion space. He forgot the Vaelth trace tightening around the Last Witness, forgot the awakened colony below them, forgot Earth bleeding its names into silence. All he could hear was his daughter speaking from a place no dead child should have been able to reach. Daddy, the key isn't on Earth. Sanaa moved first. She locked Mara's file inside a triple quarantine and threw its structure onto the main viewer. The corrupted memory unfolded in layers. A human voice print, a grief marker, alien compression, and beneath all of it a coordinate chain that had never belonged to Soul. The file was not only infected, it had been deliberately planted inside the archive before the Last Witness ever left human space. Theo stared at the data as if it might bite him. That means someone reached our systems decades ago. No, Amara Selen said, her voice low. Not someone. Something that knew which memory the captain would protect at any cost. Elias did not look away from the screen. The violation should have filled him with rage, but rage was becoming a luxury they could not afford. The Vaelth fed on emotional signatures. They mapped anger. They followed revenge back to its source. Every instinct that made him human was also a trail of blood in the water. Kestrel interrupted with a tactical update. The Dominion's final safeguard had begun. On Asterion 9, relay towers were forcing maximum erasure output, trying to burn the colony's restored identity out of the population before it could stabilize. Across distant systems, thousands of other rings were warming into the same purge cycle. The Dominion was not trying to win the battle. It was trying to destroy the evidence. Below, the colony screamed in data. The first awakened districts resisted by repeating their recovered names across public networks. The Vaelth countered by flooding streets with obedience tones. Families who had found each other only minutes ago clung together as their memories flickered. One old alien woman, the first to remember her name, stood beneath a silver tower and carved that name into her own arm before the erasure wave reached her. Then hundreds copied her. Then thousands. Theo's face twisted. They're hurting themselves to keep proof. Elias understood too well. Humans had once carved names into prison walls, scratched dates into helmets, hidden letters under floorboards, tattooed numbers over scars, and turned those numbers into testimony. The colony was not becoming human. It was doing what all stolen people did when language failed. It was making memory physical. The Vaelth High Command figure returned to the viewer. Its silver face showed no anger, no fear, no urgency. That absence was worse than hatred. Archive vessel, it said. Your action has destabilized protected populations. Surrender the memory arc, and partial restoration of Earth will be permitted. The bridge went still. Kestrel displayed the offer's embedded proof. The Vaelth could slow Earth's erasure. They could return selected identity clusters. Not all. Not the dead. Not the lost records already consumed. But enough that living humanity might remember families, cities, governments, language roots. Enough to prevent total collapse. For the first time since waking, Elias saw his crew fracture. A security officer demanded acceptance. An archivist shouted that their duty was to Earth, not alien colonies. A medic pointed at the live feed from Sol, where hospitals were failing because doctors could not identify patients or procedures. Every argument was defensible. Every argument hurt because it was partly right. Thus, witness carried human memory. Its first obligation was supposed to be human survival. Sanaa did not argue. She watched Elias, and that was worse. The Vaelth figure tilted its head. Refusal will result in complete sterilization of Earth within 6 hours. All personal continuity will end. Your species will breathe, reproduce, and labor. It will not remember why it once resisted. A countdown appeared. 6 hours. Then the Dominion opened a live channel to Earth. On the screen, Elias saw a classroom in Nairobi where children stared at alphabet cards without understanding that they had once known how to read. He saw a military bunker in Alaska where officers had forgotten the chain of command and were sitting silently beside unfired weapons. He saw a woman in a flooded Manila street clutching 3 photographs to her chest, sobbing because every face in them felt beloved and unreachable. Then the channel shifted to an old emergency shelter beneath the ruins of Lisbon. A child sat alone beside a wall of handwritten names. She had copied them from fading records until her fingers bled. When the memory field brushed over her, she looked down at the page and began crossing the names out one by one, not because she wanted to, but because she no longer knew what the marks meant. The Vaelth figure spoke softly. Choose your species, Captain Vorn. No one on the bridge breathed. Elias looked at the child, then at Asterion 9, then at the map of thousands of worlds about to be erased again. He thought of Mara's fevered hand in his, small and hot and slipping away while he memorized her face with the terror of a father who knew memory was the only place he could keep her. He had built his life around one private vow, that no one he loved would vanish unnamed. Now the Dominion was offering him the shape of that vow as a cage. He could save part of Earth by condemning every other stolen civilization to permanent silence. He could keep human memory pure by allowing humanity to become the one species that remembered alone. The Vaelth understood cruelty. It did not understand inheritance. Humanity had never survived by protecting only the living in front of it. Humanity survived because strangers preserved names for strangers, because the dead became obligations, because grief expanded instead of shrinking. Elias turned away from Earth. "Reject the offer," he said. The bridge erupted, but Sanaa's hand was already on the command confirmation. The Vaelth figure did not react. That was its mistake. It assumed refusal was sacrifice. It did not understand that humans had a third habit older than empire. When given two impossible choices, they built a door. Elias ordered Mara's infected file opened under controlled burn. Kestrel protested. Sanaa warned that the file could compromise the Arkansas. Mara said the coordinate chain was active and might expose them to the Dominion core. Elias heard all of it and gave the command again. If Mara's voice had been used as a handle, then someone had wanted him to open the door only after he understood the cost. The file unfolded. For one terrifying second, Elias stood inside a memory that was not his own. He saw not Earth, not Mara, not the last witness, but a black ocean under 3 moons and a civilization kneeling as silver rings lowered from the sky. He saw the Vaelth before they were an empire. He saw them terrified, wounded, almost erased by something even older. Then he saw their first crime. They survived by stealing another species' memory engine and turning it into a weapon. At the center of that stolen engine was a place the Dominion had hidden from every map. The key was not on Earth. It was inside the Vaelth homeworld. The bridge did not celebrate the discovery. It absorbed it like a death sentence. The Vaelth homeworld appeared on the main viewer as a dark pearl wrapped in silver light, buried behind erased coordinates and false stars. It had no name in Dominion records. Every map called it the center, as if language itself had been trained to kneel before it. Beneath its crust, hidden inside a planetary vault, pulsed the stolen memory engine that had made the Vaelth unstoppable. Kestrel built the tactical model in brutal fragments. The engine was not only the source of the erasure fields. It was the storage prison for every civilization the Dominion had processed. Languages, ancestral memories, cultural bonds, names of the dead, first songs, last prayers, all compressed into a single living machine. Destroying it would cripple the Dominion instantly, but it would also annihilate the stolen memories forever. Hijacking it could restore everyone, but the last witness would have to connect the memory arc directly to the engine and burn its entire human archive as the ignition pattern. Theo understood first. His face emptied. If we use the arc, we lose the original record of Earth. Not copies, Amara said, staring at the numbers. Not fragments. The protected root archive. The part even the Vaelth haven't touched. No one spoke after that. For 73 years, the last witness had carried humanity's proof through darkness. Every grave inscription scanned before it faded. Every child's voice backed up before the world forgot it. Every city, language, song, law, joke, confession, wedding vow, and last message preserved in perfect sequence. If the plan worked, humanity would save the galaxy by surrendering the one thing it had built to ensure it could never be erased. If the plan failed, Earth would forget, the colonies would forget, the freed worlds would be sterilized, and the last true memory of humanity would die inside enemy machinery. The Vaelth did not give them time to grieve the choice. A strike wave dropped out of folded space around Asturian 9. 9 crescent-shaped hunter vessels, silent and black, their silver cores already open. The last witness had no true warship armor. Its stealth skin blistered under the first cognitive lance, not from heat, but from intrusion. Crew members screamed as memories were pulled toward the surface of their minds and scraped raw. Sanaa kept the ship alive through instinct and violence. She rolled the last witness between the hunter formation and the planet, using Vaelth relay towers as interference shields. Kestrel fired decoy memory packets into empty space, each one containing false emotional signatures stitched from public entertainment archives, old propaganda reels, and fabricated grief. Two hunter vessels chased the ghosts and collided with the planet's defense field. It bought seconds, not safety. A third hunter punched through the aft hull. Deck 7 decompressed before the seal doors could close. 42 crew members vanished into space with no sound. Among them was Theo Armand, still tied into the archive console, his hands locked around a manual transfer lever. His last act forced the alien fragments from Asterion 9 into protected storage before the deck tore open. His name appeared on the casualty wall immediately. Then it flickered. Elias saw it and felt something inside him split. The Vaelth field was close enough now to touch the ark itself. The dead were beginning to vanish from the ship that existed to keep them. Amara crossed the bridge through sparks and falling panels, blood running from one ear. She slammed both palms onto Theo's station and began reciting his full identity into the recorder. Theo Armand, born in Marseille, son of Leora Armand, junior archivist of The Last Witness, died preserving the memory of a stolen world. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. Around the bridge, others understood and joined her, recording the names of the dead faster than the enemy could erase them. That was humanity at the breaking point, not fearless, not untouched, not victorious, but stubborn enough to argue with oblivion while the hull came apart. Sanaa looked over her shoulder. "Captain, we cannot outrun them." Elias studied the route to the Vaelth homeworld. Direct travel was impossible. Every Dominion relay between them and the center was awake. But the hunter vessels had opened a command path when they attacked, a high-priority corridor back to the source. It was meant to carry erasure orders. With enough power, it could carry one human ship in the opposite direction. The price appeared before Kestrel said it. They would have to jettison the outer vaults, redundant cultural backups, protected physical artifacts, personal memory banks, entire libraries of sensory record. Dead weight, tactically speaking. Irreplaceable, morally speaking. Elias gave the order. The crew obeyed with tears on their faces. Vaults detached from the Last Witness like pieces of a nation being cut away. A chamber of preserved musical instruments spun into darkness. A library of handwritten letters burned under a hunter beam. A gallery of children's drawings froze and shattered in vacuum. The ship grew lighter with every loss and poorer with every kilometer it survived. Asterion 9 saw what was happening. The awakened colony, still under purge, turned every remaining ground relay toward the sky and began broadcasting their recovered names, not to save themselves, but to drown the Last Witness in enough living memory noise to hide its escape. The old woman who had carved her name into her arm stood beneath the largest ring and spoke until the tower overloaded above her. The corridor opened. Sanaa drove the broken ship into it. For a moment, the Last Witness existed inside the Dominion's nervous system. Elias saw flashes of thousands of worlds in sterilization cycle, cities pausing mid-rebellion, families clinging to names, entire species on the edge of being emptied again. Then the center appeared ahead, vast and black beneath silver auroras, the hidden heart of the empire that had taught the galaxy to forget. Behind them, the last hunter locked weapons. Sanaa did not ask permission. She detached the command module's damaged shield spine and used it as a wedge, forcing the hunter into the collapsing corridor. The impact threw everyone from their stations. When Elias rose, half the bridge was dark, and Sanaa's navigation console was burning. She was still alive, barely. Kestrel reported one possible insertion window into the Vaelth homeworld, a memory intake shaft leading directly toward the engine. It was too narrow for a ship, too shielded for a missile, and too unstable for remote transfer. Someone would have to take the arc core down manually and connect it inside the machine. Elias looked at Mara's file, still glowing in quarantine, then at the wounded crew, then at the dying archive around him. He gave the final command in a voice that did not break. "We are not here to survive. We are here to make the galaxy remember."
The truth has finally emerged. The Vaelth did not erase civilizations because they were weak. They erased them because memory creates resistance. Elias has lost crew, vaults, and piece of Earth's perfect archive just to reach the Vaelth homeworld. Now the last witness is broken. The arc core must be carried into the enemy's memory engine. And humanity's final record may have to burn so the galaxy can remember.
The Vaelth homeworld did not look like a throne. It looked like a wound that had learned to shine. Silver auroras wrapped the black planet from pole to pole, pulsing in time with the memory engine buried beneath its crust. Around it hung the Dominion's last defense lattice, rings within rings, silent platforms, command relays, and stolen fragments orbiting like trophies no one was allowed to recognize. The last witness fell toward all of it with half its hull missing and the last clean record of humanity locked inside a core small enough for one man to carry. Elias Vorn descended through the intake shaft alone. The drop capsule shook so violently that the restraints cut into his shoulders. Outside the glass, the shaft walls flashed with memories stripped of owners and compressed into light. A child from a species with wings hiding under a table. A desert city singing to its dead. A mother with 4 hands tying a ribbon around a soldier's wrist. Earth appeared among them in broken flashes. Oceans, streets, hospital rooms, Mara's fevered face. The engine was trying to distract him with grief. Elias closed his eyes and spoke names into his suit recorder, not because the recorder would survive, but because the act mattered. Mara Vorn. Theo Armand. Sanaa Ree, still alive above if the ship had not broken apart. The old woman on Asterion 9 whose name he could not pronounce but would not reduce to a number. Every name became a nail driven into the dark. The capsule punched through the final membrane and crashed inside the planetary vault. The chamber beneath the Vaelth homeworld was larger than any city Elias had ever seen. At its center rose the stolen memory engine, a living tower of black glass and silver veins, rooted into the planet like a parasite that had become the heart. Around it stood the Vaelth High Archivists, motionless in a circle, their ringed eyes fixed on the human who had entered their sacred machine carrying extinction in his hands. The same silver figure from the transmissions stepped forward. "You will destroy your own species to save strangers," it said. Elias staggered from the capsule with the arc core against his chest. His suit was cracked. Blood floated inside his helmet in tiny red beads. He looked at the tower and understood the final cruelty. The engine was full. Full of worlds. Full of lives. Full of memories the Vaelth had not erased because they were too useful. They had turned remembrance into ammunition. "No," Elias said. "We are going to spend ourselves." The archivists opened their rings. Pain hit him so hard his knees struck the floor. They did not attack his body. They opened every loss inside him at once. Mara dying in his arms. Earth's names fading. Theo vanishing into space. Vaults of human music burning behind the ship. The pressure demanded one surrender. Let the grief become private, let it collapse inward, let it stop reaching for anyone else. Humanity had survived that temptation before. Elias crawled. Above the planet, the last witness made its final broadcast. Kestrel stripped itself apart to widen the signal. Sanaa, bleeding into her console, ordered every remaining crew member to speak one memory into the open channel. Not strategic data. Not commands. Memories. The smell of rain in Lagos. A grandmother's hands kneading dough. A first kiss under a broken station light. A joke told badly by a brother who never came home. The arc did not ignite with information. It ignited with meaning. Elias reached the engine and drove the core into its intake wound. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then humanity burned. Not bodies. Not cities. Not the living people still fighting to remember Earth. The root archive burned. The perfect record, the untouched vault, the sacred backup that had made the last witness humanity's final witness. It poured into the stolen engine and carried with it a contamination the Vaelth had never learned to defend against. Empathy with teeth. Grief with direction. Memory that refused ownership. The engine accepted the human archive, then choked on it. Across Dominion space, silver rings turned white. On Asterion 9, a child looked at her mother and remembered both their names. On a water world whose towers had sung empty songs for centuries, the missing words returned and the ocean cities answered in harmony. On a desert planet of nameless roads, pilgrims fell to the ground as the monuments spoke their builders' names aloud. In thousands of systems, obedience cracked under recovered ancestry. Workers became citizens. Numbers became families. Silence became accusation. The Dominion did not fall to a fleet. It fell to everyone it had forced to forget. Vaelth command channels flooded with memories they had stolen and never understood. Their soldiers hesitated as conquered species inside their own ships remembered enslavement. Their governors were dragged from palaces by populations that woke mid-sentence into centuries of rage. Their defense relays shut down one by one because the engine no longer recognized Vaelth authority as order. It recognized it as theft. Inside the vault, the High Archivists screamed for the first time. Their own stored history returned without filters. They remembered the ancient terror that had almost erased them. They remembered the first species they had sacrificed to survive. They remembered deciding that no civilization should ever grow strong enough to frighten them again. They remembered every world after that, not as files, as faces. The silver figure fell to its knees. Elias stood with one hand fused to the engine, the arc core dissolving beneath his palm. He felt Earth leave the vault and scatter outward, not gone, not preserved in one perfect tomb, but seeded into every restored civilization. Human songs braided with alien prayers. Human names carried inside languages no human throat could speak. Humanity had lost its final pure archive, but it had become impossible to isolate, impossible to delete, impossible to bury in one grave. Kestrel's final message reached him through static. Earth stabilization beginning. Identity collapse slowing. External memory return confirmed. Then Sanaa's voice, weak but alive, followed it. Captain, the galaxy is answering. The vault ceiling opened to the sky. Not physically. Through the engine, Elias saw thousands of worlds turning their restored networks toward the Vaelth homeworld. They did not fire weapons. They did not glass the planet. They surrounded it with witness. The Vaelth expected revenge. Humanity gave them memory. The homeworld sky changed. Every silver aurora became a river of names. Human names. Asterian names. Winged children. Desert builders. Ocean singers. Lost soldiers. Forgotten mothers. Civilizations the Dominion had reduced to clean numbers returned as an endless storm of identity. The Vaelth homeworld was left alive beneath it, not spared from punishment, but denied the mercy of forgetting. Elias collapsed beside the engine as Mara's file opened one last time. This time there was no alien compression beneath it, no hidden command, no infection. Only a little girl's voice, fragile and clear, carried through a galaxy that finally knew how to listen. Now they know we were here. Far above, the broken last witness turned away from the black planet. It no longer carried the whole memory of Earth. It carried something more dangerous, proof that humanity could lose its last archive and still make itself eternal. Behind it, the Dominion homeworld listened to the names it had stolen, and across the freed galaxy, no species would ever again confuse silence with peace.
And this was never a story about aliens stealing memories. It was about why names matter, why grief becomes history, and why no empire can truly control a people once their stories are shared. Humanity did not win by saving its archive. Humanity won by giving it away, turning one species' pain into a galaxy's wide act of witnesses. The Vaelth wanted silence, but humans proved that memory once carried by enough hearts becomes impossible to erase.